Good afternoon, everyone. How are you? Come on, I need a little more than that. I'm Dolly Duffy, the Executive Director of your Notre Dame Alumni Association, and I have one of my favorite guests. He thinks I'm just saying this, that I get to interview. During his tenure, he's led the Fighting Irish Athletics through so many key moments, including the formation of Fighting Irish Media, moves to the ACC, Under Armour. He's been at the forefront of every single national conversation about what's going on in athletics today. So join me in welcoming the James E. Rohr Director of Athletics and a member of the class of 1976, Jack Swarbrick.
Notre Dame's best class.
Yeah, we always go back and forth as to who has the best class. But I'm going to tell you today, you've got the best socks. I just looked down. I just read an article. You are always on point. You know, polka dots are it right now, Jack.
No, I have no idea.
It's just coincidence. Well, thanks for being here today. And it's a big weekend. It's a big game. Let's just start with football, but there's many other things to talk about. And the hiring of Marcus Freeman and where you were in that, how that unfolded. And now we're so excited to have him on board.
Yeah, every process is different. As an AD, you're always asked, do you have a list in your drawer of if your coach leaves, who you're going to hire? Absolutely not. Because every time you search, the program's in a different position. And its needs are different. And you have to figure that out. You have to make sure you know what that is. When we hired his predecessor, Brian Kelly, the program was broken. And so I had to find a program builder. And we focused on people who had success building a program effectively from scratch that was broken. And Brian fit that description perfectly. This time that wasn't the approach. The program was in pretty good shape. We were looking for somebody who could take it to the next level. So recruiting was a very big part of it. Maintaining the culture was a especially important part of it. And as we demonstrated in the press conference and otherwise, the players had a big impact on me. Not to pick Marcus, but to protect the culture. They were so proud of what they had built. And they said to me, don't screw this up, Jack, and protect this culture. Marcus fit that perfectly for us. And so you start the process. I didn't know if it would take a month or 6 weeks. It took 4 days. And we reached out to everybody in the country. We talked to a lot of people. We kept coming back to he's the right person. And I feel that way now even more than the day I made the decision. So we're thrilled.
What has transpired between then and now to make you feel even more like this was the right decision?
How you handle Marshall and Stanford, right? It's the truth. Those were terrible losses. I'm a Stanford alum too. No offense, but
don't boo.
They're not terribly good this year, and. So how do you deal with that? How does he react to that? It's easy to react, when you beat 16th ranked North Carolina and 16th ranked BYU as soundly as we did. North Carolina hadn't lost another game. But how do you handle those moments? The moments of disappointment. What is your leadership like? And he was spectacular. We got to figure out why it happened and not let it happen again. But to protect what he'd built, to maintain the culture, to have the student athletes feel as good as they did, that was powerful for me. So that's why.
That's great. He's all in, that's for sure.
Yeah, there's no question. One of my biggest challenges is to get him to do less. If when Dolly calls him and says, "Will you do something?" he says yes.
Just a funny side story at the North Carolina game. I never had a chance to tell you this, but we were sitting in the bar area the night before the game, and Holly Rowe, the sideline reporter, was there, and we were talking about this 10-city tour that we had just done with Marcus Freeman. Jack, I might say at Marcus's request, right? And Holly says, you know, I think it would be so cool if we decided to do the same thing, but go to 3 European cities. And I would even volunteer to be the one to do the interviews. And I didn't say too much, and she pulled Jack aside as he's walking out, and Jack said, no. He said, not only that, I see Dolly Duffy's fingerprints all over this.
I did.
But
Yeah.
but the truth be known, it was Holly.
Holly threw you under the bus. I'm sorry.
So let's talk about fingerprints all over things, right? Everything that happens in athletics here, but I would say everything that happens in major decision making around the country, especially as we look at football playoffs and all of that, you're a part of it. You had some strong opinions on it. Tell us about that and what you think should happen.
Well, it's just part of being Notre Dame's athletic director. I don't want to suggest it's me.
I'm suggesting it's you.
By virtue, for example, of being Notre Dame's athletic director, I'm on the management committee of the college football playoff. It's a great honor. It's a great place to be as we think about the future of college football. And we just don't think about the playoffs. We think about the future of college football and how to protect it. And, you know, we get to play a role in that. What's been kind of fun about it is, but it drives the media a little crazy, there's no way to describe the management committee other than to write the 10 conference commissioners and Notre Dame athletic director Jack Swarbrick, right? So we get mentioned every time. It's a little unnerving to others, but it's the only way you can describe the group. And then conference realignment it's been an interesting chapter, but it's been, you know, essentially about what's Notre Dame going to do. And that's a great position to be in. It reinforces our place in college athletics, and we were able to reinforce the importance of independence. And so it's been a good year in that regard.
Any big surprises for you and when you are so enmeshed in this, in the conference realignment happenings?
Not really. I mean, did I know USC and UCLA would go to the Big Ten? No. Did I know USC was very restless? Yes. So I knew Oklahoma and Texas were going to make the move that they made. But, yeah, you never know completely. And the only thing I'd say is it's not over. We may have a little period of calm here, but it's not over.
So the role of an athletic director has changed, in my humble opinion, drastically in the last decade, with things like conference realignment happening all the time, with the playoffs, with name, image, and likeness, which I'm going to ask you about next. And you happen to be the absolute right person at the right time to come to Notre Dame to look at television contracts, to do all of it. Do you think that we'll see the role of the athletic director change more? Will we stop here? What kind of a person will it take going forward in some of these major schools?
Yeah, it's a great question. I'm glad I'm old enough that I don't have to figure it out. It will continue to evolve. The demands are completely different than they were for Moose Krause, and they'll be different for the next athletic director as well. You know, there's so much about the industry, as your question suggests, is changing, that the skill set required, the demands are going to have to change as well. You know, some things are clear right now. More and more authority will be vested in conferences. The conferences have tiered themselves. You have the Big Ten and the SEC, and then you have the ACC and Big 12 and Pac-12, and then what we used to call the Group of Five, and that's going to be a reality of governance. The Big Ten and SEC are going to exert really significant influence. Conferences generally will control more, and we'll see what the future of the NCAA is. The NCAA needs to exist, but it hasn't been very effective in a while, and we have to find a way to make it more effective than it is right now.
So the NCAA has not been very effective. Do you think that is because of where they are and their inability to transform what they're doing, or what has changed that has made them ineffective?
The single biggest issue, and keep in mind, the NCAA is a membership association, right? The NCAA has never adopted a bad piece of legislation that its members didn't vote for. They are us, and that's part of it. The fundamental challenge is that we've lost a commonality of interest. Every business association requires a commonality of interest to succeed. I don't care what it is, right? What business association. And as we've gone from schools in the same association with annual budgets ranging from $250 million to $25 million, or fully integrated into the university, or as opposed to operating independent of the university, the list goes on. That commonality is lost. And then the membership association doesn't have the glue it needs to function effectively. And so that's number one. Number two, we, for reasons that I've never fully understood, got stuck defending a principle of amateurism that didn't make any sense to me. It was never about amateurism. And frankly, amateurism is not a positive value. It just, I mean, whoever said, the babysitter's experience would be a lot better if we didn't pay her. It was the wrong thing to lay our hat on. We should have been talking about education. We should have been talking about remaining fully engaged as students, not their status as amateurs. Once you made it about amateurism, you had to talk about money. We should have stayed away from all that. So between this loss of a bond and a really stupid strategy, we went down this path where we have a perfect record in major lawsuits. We've lost them all. And that's how the governance has now taken shape. Courts have decided what will be and what the rules are, and we're living with that.
So let's talk about money, right? Name, image, and likeness. I'm still trying to wrap my head around what that really means and what it looks like. Can you talk about it globally and then what that means at Notre Dame and how you view it?
Yeah, well, we're very proud of the fact that the first university to publicly endorse name, image, and likeness was this university. In an interview in the New York Times, I believe it's now 7 years ago, Father John said, we need to allow student athletes to capture the value of their name, image, and likeness, because every other student at Notre Dame can capture the value of their name, image, and likeness. And for us, that's the litmus test. If we draw distinctions where we do something different for student athletes than other students, we have to have a compelling reason to do it. And there wasn't a compelling reason in our view to do that. So we were thrilled that the concept advanced and student athletes are able to do it. We didn't expect it to come into play with no effective regulation. And that's what happened. And so, as opposed to name, image, and likeness transactions, a commercial transaction where based on the value of your name or your image or your likeness or your idea, you are given a fair market compensation. People decided to call any transaction name, image, and likeness, sort of purify it with the name, and they turned into talent acquisition fees. And so too much of what's happening right now has nothing to do with name, image, and likeness. It has to do with trying to have somebody come to an institution or stay at an institution. And that's not name, image, and likeness. You could argue that's what we should be doing, and that student athletes as employees is the way to go. But let's have that discussion. Let's not call something what it isn't as a way to get to that result.
I read an article recently that talked about the number of dollars that individuals have annually in paid reoccurring subscriptions. And it was shocking to me how high it was. So that led me to think about paid subscriptions, and then it led me to think, let's talk about Peacock. And what are we doing there? With some of the games being only on Peacock, only one per year the last couple years, where is that going, and why are we headed in that direction?
Well, mainly because there's some weeks I don't get enough mail. And if I put a game on Peacock, I can assure that I'll get more correspondence that week. Streaming is central to the future of media. That's not a controversial proposition. It just is. And I was just in a meeting this morning where we were talking about this, and cable reach has declined precipitously in the past 10 years. And part of that is because streaming is headed in the opposite direction. We don't want a trend that's going to be so central to the future of media generally to evolve without understanding it and being part of it. And so we were proud last year to be the first college football program to live stream a game when we streamed the Toledo game on Peacock. This year it was UNLV, and we'll continue to do that. It's important to our partner, NBC. We learn a lot every time we do it. But one of the real advantages of streaming, so when we're on NBC, on Monday I'll know how many people watched it, and I'll get some broad demographic information that'll tell me how many people in such an age group and how many males and how many females. When you stream, you know exactly who watched you. And that helps us serve our fans better and understand who they are and what's important to them. So on so many levels, leading in the industry, understanding streaming, knowing our fans better, it's really important to our future.
A couple of weeks ago, we had Mike Bray here, and he talked a little bit about the upcoming season. And hoping to connect with Niele Ivey. Let's talk a little bit about some of the other fall sports and how you view what they're doing and how excited you are about basketball in particular and, well, all of them.
Yeah, we're coming off a year where we won the Capital One Cup for the best overall male sports program in the country. And, that's a real honor. We'd love to win the Director's Cup, too, which measures both men's and women's program. But the Capital One Cup has a cash prize, so I'll take the Capital One Cup. We finished 8th in the Director's Cup. So we're coming off an especially good year for us. And it continues this fall. Both cross-country teams are nationally ranked. And they've built a real tradition of excellence here. Our women were 5th nationally last year. And so I think they just had the conference meet, and they're working their way towards the nationals, and so they're having a great year. Women's soccer is ranked as high as 4th in the country, and it's heading into tournament play, and we have great expectations for them. They're playing at a very elite level. Men's soccer went to the College Cup last year, Final Four of college soccer. This year has not reached the same peaks, and they're disappointed, but it's the nature of the sport. It's a bad bounce here, a bad call there, and they've had their share of them this year. So I know they're disappointed, but that program is really in a good position. We brought in a new women's volleyball coach who is a force of nature. Salima Rockwell will make a difference here, and we will soon have a program that's competing with the best in the country. And our basketball teams, I couldn't be more optimistic. I've had the opportunity to see both play. I think the women are back to the level of competing at the very top of the national scene, hopefully for national championships. And the guys have a great blend of old and young. We have 2 freshmen who's going to play a lot of minutes for us, and then we have some seniors and 50-year guys who've been playing for us since they were freshmen. So I feel great about both those. And hockey, early in the season, but they look really good.
That's it. That makes for a great fall. So one of the questions that someone posed to me was that Jack gets to see so many athletes. You know, as you talk about all these different sports and all the different kinds of athletes, who's an athlete, or who are a couple stories that you could share with us of athletes that you were really impressed by, but not everyone knew them? Didn't necessarily see them. Does anyone come to mind?
Yeah, but I guess I don't want to go down that road, right? You know.
Okay. Because there
You-
are so
you-
many.
You mentioned her and you didn't mention me, or it's just like yeah. It's look, it's wedding invitations, it's birth announcements, it's it's helping someone discern their career after sports. It's those moments. It's a student athlete in crisis sometime. Yeah, I love being in the post game locker room after a huge victory. But I remember much more the individual moments with student athletes that create bonds for life, and that's the payoff in this job. I'm going to leave here and visit with Clemson's very talented athletic director for a little while, and he has the same experience, right? We both get to work with great student athletes and at institutions that are small enough that you get to know them really well, and that's the privilege of this job.
So do you have time for a couple of questions from the audience?
Of course.
Great. So we've got one right over here, and I think that Courtney has a microphone.
Jack, can you shed some light on exactly why Brian Kelly left? Was it the allegedly $10 million? I mean, 10 million over 10 years? Is that the reason?
Yes, the answer is no, I can't. I just think that's for Brian to answer. He and I did discuss it, and I have my own views, but I don't want to answer for him.
Jack, we're going to probably have about 80,000 in the stadium tomorrow, and a few people are going to wear a mask, and they're probably immune compromised, which is okay. Now, my question is, what happened to the pep rallies? Why don't we have them?
We don't have the pep rallies because we were so challenged to generate attendance, and the students especially were unwilling to attend anymore, and we needed their participation.
So no more pep rallies.
We'll always have one to start the year, and there'll be some years we'll have a second one.
Hi, Jack. I'm curious. You talked about the kind of the stratification you've seen happen with the bigger conference. So, at what point does that model maybe break? Is there a tipping point where if you get 16 teams, 18 teams in a conference, and they just seem to dominate, even you see formerly strong programs like Oklahoma or Texas move over, they're going to want to be middle of the pack in an SEC where they thought they could rise to the top, and at some point, the have-nots, those outside the 65, or even some at the bottom of the 65, Vanderbilts or so on and so forth, lose. When does that model break, do you think?
That's a great question. The general assumption among people who believe it will break, it's not sustainable, is that it'll fracture along financial lines. I think it's as likely to fracture along cultural lines. If you think of college athletics as a spectrum, on one end of the spectrum are institutions that fully integrate athletics into the university, as we choose to do. And on the other end of the spectrum are programs that license the university name and run an independent sports program. Both models are fine. I'm not criticizing the model that I just described, right? It's a legitimate choice to make, but it's hard to coexist. And so I can imagine easily a day down the line where it fractures along those lines, and schools will say, no, especially as we're going to have student athletes declared employees in the near future. by a court or administrative agency. It's coming. When that happens, that may sort of contribute to this view of, no, we want students, we don't want employees, or we're okay managing an employee group here, and that's the way we'll choose to do it. But when that'll happen, I don't have a clue. But I think you're right. I don't think it can hold together at this size with all the tension in it. We'll see what it becomes.
How about one more question?
Does our academic requirements hurt us in the portal program?
I don't think it's fair to say it's the academic requirements, so much as it is that transferring into Notre Dame, as with many schools, is a complicated process. It is easier. It's not easier to get in, but the process is easier to manage when you're coming in as a freshman, when that's your issue. Transfer decisions are made by each of the schools individually. So Mendoza makes a decision whether to accept a transfer, the engineering department does, the biology department does, and it's hard to get consistency across those. It's hard to know that, yeah, this person who's interested in transferring will be able to get in. So we have two issues. One is being able to respond fast enough, and two is having enough consistency and understanding that we can project accurately whether we're going to get a yes or a no. And so it's not because the requirements in terms of educational performance are different. It's because the process is different and harder to manage.
I know Jack has a really busy schedule. He is always so quick to say yes, and for that, I'm incredibly appreciative. Please join me in thanking Jack Swarbrick.
Thank you. And be Irish.